In BT and applications, we are looking at biotechnology and agriculture in relation to food production. Now, whenever we are talking in terms of food, we understand when we take any country, or if you take especially India, we have three important types of agriculture. We have first one is termed as agrochemical based agriculture. Now, agrochemical based agriculture has its dependency on pesticides, weedicides and fertilizers. So, whenever we are dealing with relation to high end agriculture, that is high external input agriculture, all high external input agriculture believes in the application of pesticides, weedicides and fertilizers. The reason is we need to go in for high crop yield and we need to block the sort of diseases and the sort of pests. So, to eliminate the diseases and pests, we use high chemical end agriculture. This is one type of an agriculture which is practiced in India. The second type of agriculture is termed as organic agriculture. In organic agriculture, there is no use of chemicals, or there is the minimal use of chemicals. Organic agriculture is based on the natural fertility of soils. It is based on the natural fertility of soils and it is based on the biological diversity of the crops. So, in an organic agriculture, primarily we have the links between plants, microbes and insects as well as the soil in terms of biological diversity. So, organic agriculture is a form of ecological agriculture. A third type of an agriculture which is evolving in India now is termed as genetically engineered, crop based agriculture. So, in genetically engineered crop based agriculture, which is of recent origin due to the evolution of biotechnology, we are genetically engineered crops. The reasons why we need to genetically engineer the crops is we need to go for high yield, we need to go for higher food production for the population, and we have limited resources. We understand that the soils are polluted, the water is polluted, the climate is polluted, and we have more use of fertilizers and we have lot of residual effect of pesticides. So, despite all these things, if ever we want to encounter the sort of agriculture based agriculture, that is the green revolution, we have to deal with a new type of an agriculture which is termed as genetically engineered crop based agriculture, and genetically engineered crop based agriculture has got some basics. Like if you take green revolution, green revolution was a process, or it started in the 1960s. When you take green revolution, it had started in the 1960s. In 1960, William Gord, the director of USAID, United States Assistance to Development, had coined the term green revolution. He coined the term green revolution. So, green revolution was a need in the 1960s, when we had the entire globe moving to a higher plane in terms of food production, and especially if you take developing countries like India, which required the correct facility input and the sort of facility for quality food. Then we had normal Borlaug. Now, normal Borlaug initiated green revolution. He was the first person to start green revolution in the world. So, he is called the father of the green revolution. Normal Borlaug is called the father of the green revolution. The term green revolution was coined by William Gord. Thirdly, if you take the success of green revolution in India, the success of green revolution in India has been attributed to Dr. M.S. Swaminathan. So, he is popularly termed as the father of the Indian Green Revolution. So, Professor Swaminathan primarily worked with relation to improving of rice and maize and wheat varieties in India. Now, what are the factors which were responsible for the success of the green revolution in the 1960s and even in the 1970s? There were several sort of factors. We had the economic factors as well as we had the social factors. Now, green revolution in India primarily deals with improved varieties of rice, maize and wheat. Improved varieties of rice, maize and wheat. So, we have first important application of green revolution is it started with improved varieties. Traditional varieties have mediocre yield and traditional varieties could not stand the test of time, because many of the traditional varieties which were domesticated had a sort of a plateau in the sort of an yield. They could not give rise to, they could not have high yield. So, improved varieties with relation to wheat, rice and maize are the cornerstones of green revolution. And green revolution also emphasized the use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. Chemical fertilizers and pesticides, because the soil and the plant had to have NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. And pesticides were very important for killing the most important sort of pathogens and disease and the pests which cause the sort of disease in crops. So, green revolution also encompassed improved irrigational facilities, that is availability of water for the crop during all its stages of growth and development, and it also had the adoption of better agricultural management practices, Better agricultural management practices means how do you see to that the growth is improved upon or the reproduction is improved upon, especially in terms of crop weed interaction. It was parallel with bringing about lot of land reforms. So, as you look at the sort of list, it includes both social factors and economic factors were responsible for the success of the green revolution, along with the sort of a scientific principles. So, social and scientific principles were the basis primarily in terms of economy for the success of the green revolution. So, the green revolution had led to 3 times increase in the sort of a food production. Food production was enhanced or tripled 3 times due to the green revolution, and this is very, very important in terms of increasing population, But however, the farmers in the third world or the farmers in the developing world were especially they were finding it little difficult to adapt the sort of a green revolution. So, green revolution technology had its sort of a limitations. It had several sort of a limitations. So, some of the limitations of the green technology was that the farmer found there is a high cost of agrochemicals, agrochemical costs. The farmer could not adjust to the high cost of agrochemicals, and they knew that agrochemicals could harm the sort of an environment. So, it was the agriculture was not environmental friendly, and again the farmers also could not cope up to what were the sort of a limitations. There were several sort of a limitations of the particular conventional breeding techniques. Conventional breeding techniques wherein you take the sort of a pollen and dust it on the sort of a stigma. These are the conventional breeding techniques which are practiced in agriculture. These conventional breeding techniques could not exactly contribute to higher yields. Therefore, given these sort of limitations, given the limitations of agriculture cost which was directly seen by the farmers, given the effect of agrochemicals on the environment and the limitations of the sort of a conventional plant breeding on one side, and on the other side with the depletion of the natural resource base, we have the soils, the land and the water exactly receding in terms of abundance. So, given the limitations of we have the lacking of the nutrients in the soil, the water getting polluted, etc., we seem to be in a sort of a dilemma in terms of the food production. Therefore, under these sort of circumstances, we understand that genetically modified foods and genetically modified plants seem to be a possible solution. A possible solution because it is a sort of a new technology. Normally, we understand that when we have problems, all problems are solved by means of newer technologies. So, biotechnology seems to be ushering as a sort of an answer to food production. So, thereby we understand that somewhere in the 80s and somewhere in the 90s, we have moved from one type of a revolution called the green revolution to a sort of a gene revolution. Till now, we have been dealing with relation to what are the features of the green revolution agriculture, why green revolution agriculture was important, what were the limitations of the green revolution as perceived by the farmers, and what exactly is the way forward. The way forward had been the rethinking about agriculture in terms of food production and the ushering of a new technology which is termed as gene technology. So, gene technology takes its sort of an advantage due to the advent of biotechnology. That is, once we had the recombinant DNA technology coming up, the recombinant DNA technology has today proved to be one of the most important sort of components for gene technology. It is again based on the principles of genetic engineering. It is based on the principles of genetic engineering or molecular biology. Genetic engineering and the advent of biotechnology has been the background for gene technology. So, once we adapt the use of gene technology, what really happens? Now, gene technology seems to be an answer because we can break the natural species barriers. We can break the natural species barriers. If you understand, species is a group of organisms which are isolated and they can reproduce among themselves to produce fertile offsprings. However, when we unconventionally or non-conventionally we follow through novel methods or we are adapting newer technologies. When we adapt newer technologies, we understand a foreign gene of interest can move from a prokaryote to a eukaryote. Thereby, we are breaking down the natural species barriers, which was once a sort of a conventional sort of a characteristic feature of a plant population or a microbial population or an animal population. And next one is it is a sort of a breakthrough science which believes in systematically transfer genes. We can systematically, that is following a particular sort of a procedure. We follow a particular sort of a procedure. There are basic principles, protocols and procedures and rules. We can systematically transfer genes between prokaryotes and eukaryotes, and in terms of in between bacteria and other plants. So, there is transfer of genes which can occur from one species to another. So, these are the sort of basic advantages of gene technology. You can transfer genes from one species to another, from one plant cell to another plant cell, which is not possible in nature. Given a situation, we really can't go back to conventional nature. Conventional nature may not give you the sort of an economic produce which is important for solving the food problems of the world. Thereby, gene technology seems to be a first step towards improving food production, and we can very easily develop novel plants or new plants, primarily for the sake of food, primarily for the sake of pharma, primarily for the sake of food processes. So, gene technology is otherwise also it is possible to think in terms of gene technology as an environmentally sound agricultural production. The reason is it does not contribute to pesticides. It does not contribute to pesticides and herbicides. And the goal is precision farming. The goal is precision farming or molecular farming, whereby we are only studying and analyzing and working on your specific gene of interest. So, now we come to primarily with relation to genetically modified organisms. When we take genetically modified organisms, what are genetically modified organisms? They are organisms which have been genetically manipulated. It is not as if today biotechnology is involved in genetic manipulation. Right from the start of agriculture, we had the sort of pollen getting dusted onto the stigma, and man had progressed into the agricultural revolution by manipulation of the sort of a flower. So, genetic manipulation of today, of modern science genetic manipulation, primarily results in high yield. It results in high yield varieties, and you can also develop disease resistant varieties. So, all genetically modified organisms show genetic manipulation, they are high yielding, and they also our aim is to develop disease resistant varieties. Now, we understand that we can develop crops which are tolerant. Crops which are tolerant to abiotic stress. Now, what exactly do you mean by abiotic stress? Crops which are tolerant to extremes of cold, extremes of heat, as well as drought, and for salt conditions. Think in terms of variations of climate. There could be extremes of cold, extremes of heat, extremes of drought, as well as there could be high salt conditions as well as low salt conditions. All these situations can arise. If there is a rise in the sea water, sea rise in mangroves can lead to high salt conditions. Loss of water can lead to drought and famine. And again, changes in climate, like if you got the global warming, it can lead to either very high temperatures or very cold temperatures. So, under these sort of conditions, how does a sort of a plant adapt, or how does a sort of a crop adapt for again procuring your high yield, for improving mankind? So, that is the reason why biotechnology addresses to all these particular issues. A second important feature of all genetically modified plants is they show reduced reliance on pesticides and chemicals, on pesticides. So, how do you get the reduced reliance on pesticides? You can develop pesticide resistant crops. You can develop pesticide resistant crops by genetic engineering. Like if you take a bacteria called Bacillus thuringiensis, which is called as Bt. The bacteria of the strain Bt can directly, by genetic modification or by genetic engineering, can function as a bioinsecticide. It can function as a bioinsecticide. So, we have the development of Bt cotton, which is pest resistant, Bt cotton. We also have Bt corn. We have Bt corn. We again have Bt rice, tomato, Bt tomato, and also Bt potato and soya bean. So, all the Bt lines are pesticide resistant crops. They are also termed as they have been developed by use of bioinsecticides. So, there is a lot of plus and minus points about biotechnology and also about Bt crops. We would be learning about the limitations and the sort of advantages of biotechnology. Then, now especially let us go into a situation of studying exactly what exactly is the meaning of the development of Bt cotton. We would be taking the case study of Bt cotton or Bacillus thuringiensis cotton, that is a pesticide resistant cotton.